Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the professional world has had to make a huge number of adjustments in the way that they operate, and this has often included the location from which professionals are required to work. The following content will include advice for remote workers and professionals who are required to work from the home network as securely as possible. The purpose of this module is to give you a good understanding of the security best practices whilst working from home, including my top 10 cybersecurity tips for keeping your home network locked down while using it for work. We'll then look at virtual private networks or VPNs, which are a great way to extend your work network securely, before learning about hard drive encryption and why that's a good idea. We'll also go over the best practices for hosting and attending virtual online meetings with software like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, before looking at some physical security housekeeping and finishing off with the attacker's perspective. So let's get started with my top 10 tips for working securely from home. Whenever possible, it's a sensible idea to keep your work and your personal or home devices separate. Avoid sharing the laptop you use for work with the kids or even your partners, as mistakes do happen. Work could be lost, or that email that you're in the middle of might get sent prematurely. Other user accounts could be compromised and increase your device's attack surface, or it could simply be the use of vulnerable apps or software that could compromise security. An additional option might be to isolate part of your home network and use it purely for work as an added layer of security. We have all heard stories of fraudsters rummaging through our bins looking for documents containing sensitive information and piecing them together to steal our identities. Dumpster diving is a real thing, and there are accounts of criminals who get good at this activity, earning over £100,000 a year, so it's no joke. Keep your information digital and avoid printing if at all possible. If you do have to print documents, always make sure you shred any that you don't need and never bin them intact to be pilfered and abused later. Social engineers are great actors and love to call their marks under the guise of the IT support. If you get an unusual phone call and you don't know the caller 100%, double check their story or request is legitimate with your line manager or boss to avoid being tricked into disclosing information that an attacker can use. Keeping your software up to date is crucial in ensuring that new exploits and vulnerabilities found are patched and protected against. For most people, having automatic updates switched on is the best option, and there are additional features in many antivirus packages that will alert you to outdated applications too. Phishing is now rife, and attack numbers have surged in 2020 as more people have been forced to work remotely. Half of all cyber attacks in the UK are estimated to be phishing attempts, which is 20% above the global average at the time this content was created, and there's no sign of it slowing down anytime soon. It's a good idea to regularly check to see if your email address has been compromised in a data breach, which you can do on our website at breaches.sencode.co.uk. And never click on a link or open an attachment unless you're 100% certain it is legitimate. You can simply contact the sender to confirm its authenticity. Falling for phishing attacks can mean valuable information theft, loss of system control, or even activating some nasty ransomware that could encrypt your entire network and hold it to ransom. Another form of phishing to be aware of is smishing or SMS phishing. Just as the name suggests, it's an attack via an SMS text message that may try to lure you into clicking on malicious links. Again, check the source by contacting them and confirming the legitimacy of the message. It's recommended that you avoid using public Wi-Fi for work altogether. It is impossible to know who controls the access point, and it will leave you wide open to anyone snooping on the network, which could potentially expose work-sensitive and confidential data. There are a number of actions you can take to secure your home network. First of all, the access to your wireless network must be guarded by a strong password. If you get a new internet provider, they often come with a password that you should change immediately. It is also possible to isolate parts of your home network for work to make it extra secure, but details of how to do that will be in another module. Changing your passwords regularly is one of the best ways that you can keep your digital life secure. Make sure you never use the same password twice for different sites. If one gets hacked, then all others are compromised. I recommend using a password manager that will generate and remember strong passwords for you, and you will only need one strong memorable passphrase to access them all. We all need to get up, have a stretch, grab a drink, and have a comfort break now and then. But it's great practice to be in the habit of locking your computer when you do so. That way, you have the peace of mind that you're the only person with access to your machine and there can be no intruders in your absence. One of the best ways to ensure your privacy online is by setting up a virtual private network, or VPN. This technology extends your private network across a public one and enables each end user to send and receive data across shared or public networks as if they were connected directly. The best way to think of a VPN is like a tunnel across the network that is impervious to interference from other users on the network. VPNs often use encryption and are a great way to protect sensitive data on the work network when you are working remotely. It's important to do a little bit of research into VPN providers, as you need to make sure you trust them to keep your data secure. There are some free options, but it's advisable to go with a provider with the best reputation. VPNs are becoming more widely used now, and some browsers like Opera have an optional VPN built into it. For many people, encrypting their entire hard drive might seem like an extreme and complicated measure that would be more trouble than it's worth, but the process is actually not a difficult one, and the pros for doing this do outweigh the cons. In fact, more and more storage drives, particularly SSDs, are coming with built-in encryption these days. With a little bit of Googling, it's easy to find out the best option for your system, and can often be done through the Windows operating system with an unnoticeable impact on performance. Doing this, of course, will mean that any intruders will not be able to access anything on your storage drive without the decryption key. Physical security matters and simply requires a little thought and common sense. Human beings make mistakes, but try and avoid them when securing your car or your home. If you leave your keys in the door of your house or your car with your laptop sat on the front seat, then unfortunately you're asking for trouble. And believe me, this does happen a lot.
Basically, everyone's exploded to working remotely and then jerry-rigged a system together and then decided, oh, we don't have policies in place for this. And now, crap, all the attackers are looking at our remote infrastructure and it's made of duct tape and like rubber ducks. When you're talking about working remotely, there's some things that you can do. The easy sanitization stuff, like checking that every email that comes from is coming from a trusted source, right? For the general phishing stuff, but that's not just working remotely, that's everything. Ensuring that any Wi-Fi access points that you're using to connect to company infrastructure are secure, whether they have a password or you're using a VPN only to talk to internal devices on the network. That's a really important thing if you do have a VPN. And multi-factor authentication again. It means that because people are logging in from such spread out locations now, that you not only know the password, right? Because if you're checking the logs and you've got a password login from 15 different places in the UK, that's quite possibly a normal person now, whereas it never used to be. So having multi-factor authentication enabled on that stuff is another layer of security that doesn't mean that you can rely on location. If you are working remotely and sending files, it's important that those files are encrypted. When you're sending a piece of information, if you're on a malicious hotspot, it's possible for an attacker to take a file out of the air and get that file. So sending those files encrypted is a really important step in securing data transfer.
One of the most dramatic changes that we've seen to how we all work from a remote location is the way in which we attend meetings virtually now. We've all had to get used to communicating using online virtual meeting software like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, to give a couple of examples, and very few of us have had any training as to the most secure way to do this. So I've put together a few best practices that you should bear in mind when participating in your online meetings. Don't share links. You don't always know if they're safe and they could affect everyone in the meeting. Using consumer grade software can also leave you open to exploitation. Make sure participants can't screen share by default because anything could pop up. If you don't need to use your video, then don't. It does take up bandwidth and it can ruin the call quality anyway. Also, don't record calls unless you need to, and you need permission from all participants if you do. Make sure meetings are locked and eject participants when finishing. Leaving them connected could allow them to listen in after your meeting. Again, keep the software you're using updated and ensure password protection is on. Waiting room features are a great option for vetting your participants. Finally, educate other employees who host meetings and make sure they are also trained. So, just to summarise what we've covered in this module, when working remotely or from home, you need to make sure that you're not sharing your work computer. You're not creating a paper trail of sensitive information, and make sure that you're shredding. You need to verify your calls, keep your hardware and software updated, be vigilant when opening emails and text messages, avoid working on public Wi-Fi, and secure your own home network for work. Change your passwords and use a password manager. Make sure unattended devices are locked. Make sure you encrypt your hard drives and connect to your work network using a VPN. Make sure you and other employees understand the best practices for virtual meetings online, and ensure that your working environment is physically secure.